Welcome to Amazon Legends, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became power sellers, also providers specializing in helping sellers, aggregators that acquire sellers, and former Amazonians will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here is your host, Nick Uresin.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today is the best kind of entrepreneur because she is the kind of person who created something out of a need that she had as she was an Amazon seller. So she was an Amazon seller almost a decade ago, and then she had a problem and she thought there's got to be a better way to deal with this and created a solution for it. And today she's the founder of that solution called Stockouts, which is a well-known inventory management software for Amazon sellers. She's going to share all the ways to deal with inventory management. And also recently, Stockouts was doing so well. It was acquired by Carbon 6. So she's the proud owner of that. And when she's not working, she likes to cook, garden, and read in her free time. So with that, everybody, meet my guest, Chelsea Cohen. Welcome to the show, Chelsea.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
You know, like I said, you are my favorite kind of person. That I heard this term in one of the conferences by a keynote speaker called, you have to be prepared to eat your own dog food. So when you do that, you know that whatever you're working on is going to work. So you're one of those people. So tell me something in Stockouts you do very well right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the focus has shifted in the past couple of years into inventory management. And so one of the things that we're doing really well is finding that sweet spot between avoiding stockouts and avoiding overstocking. And that's something that we call min-max restocking. It's setting those minimums and those maximums and always staying within that range. So if you're selling 90 days worth of inventory, you stock up to 90, sell through to 30, and then stock back up to 90. So that would be min-max restocking, which is controlling the balance between avoiding stockouts and avoiding overstocking.
I see. Okay. So this reminds me of, this is an interesting concept because when I was an Amazon seller, I built a platform which was, it wasn't private label, but it was reselling. And so it was mainly playing the buy box. And playing the buy box, those days, there were no repricers, no nothing. So I came up with a similar concept of the minimum and the maximum. And today, it's the standard for all the repricers. They say, put in your minimum, put in your maximum. So, of course, the challenge is knowing what that minimum is and that changes over time. Like if you have inventory, you have enough inventory and the price is going up and things like that. So in your case, you have a similar model. So you're defining what is your minimum and what is your maximum, and your maximum is 90-day requirement. Minimum is 30-day.
90-day would be the most. Some people do 60-day. It just depends on how quickly they can turn over their inventory. So if they have smaller orders, they may want to send a larger amount. So they may need 90 days. But if they are a larger seller, it may be, a 60-day turn. So really, it depends on some of those factors. 30 days, I would say, is always the minimum. Some people do 45 days. You want to not go below 30 because Amazon has something called geo-ranking, and that looks at how much inventory is dispersed throughout the country. And then if you don't have enough inventory, they'll start reducing you in the ranking in certain parts of the country because you don't have enough inventory to supply the 2-day prime delivery.
I see. So that's very valuable information. So geo-ranking for Amazon means that if you are not carrying enough inventory, there isn't enough that they can distribute around the country in their distribution centers to fulfill the order. So therefore, they modulate the amount of orders you're getting. And of course, they do that by ranking you down, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's extremely valuable. So as far as the score, IPI score,
Sure.
so for listeners' benefit, that is the inventory performance index that Amazon
Mm-hmm.
assigns. So you want your IPI score to be high so that you're not paying high storage rates.
Mhm.
If it drops, that means you're carrying more inventory than you're selling, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, it's all the factors kind of touch sell-through. So you have excess inventory, you have, in stock rate, stranded inventory, and then sell-through, right? But every single one of those factors is affects sell-through. So you need to focus primarily on sell-through. Sell-through is the #1 metric that Amazon uses for inventory management within their warehouses.
And sell-through is the number of orders you receive per day.
How quickly you will sell through the order. So when you ship in a shipment, how soon until that shipment has sold out, basically.
Okay. And what is the right number? How long should it be before to replenish again?
Yeah, so that gets into our minimums and our maximums. Ideally, Amazon would like you turning over inventory at all times. So I'd say between, 60 days usually worth of inventory. Some people go as low as 30, but I don't think that that's a good idea. Because of geo ranking, and also because Amazon can sometimes be unreliable checking your inventory in. So I would say you'd want to turn over inventory every 30 to 60 days.
Okay. So we are actually seeing some inefficiencies and delays at Amazon and recently, where they are taking longer to receive, and they are losing some of this inventory, some of the shipments. So that makes it even more important to make sure that you are carrying enough, because if you run out of stock, then that's the kiss of death, right? So everything falls apart. So as far as calculating your minimum and maximum, can you give us some, because this is an algorithm deal, right? So you can't look at just one number and say, okay, this is how I'm going to sell, how many pieces I'm going to sell. So share with us, you are the expert in this. How do you calculate how much inventory you should have in stock?
Sure. Yeah. So if you want to set your minimum, I'd start with 30 days toward, let's say closer to Prime Day or closer to the holiday sales season. You may want to bump that up to 45, because during those times, Amazon takes longer to check things in. So you want to kind of account for those busy times and Amazon being backlogged. So you might do 45 days during those periods. And then you take your daily sales velocity and you multiply that by that number of days, 30 days or 45 days, and that will get you your minimum. When you calculate your daily sales velocity, you need to make sure that you're not including stockouts. So if you're looking at, let's say, your 30-day average sales velocity, but 8 of those days were stocked out, the average is going to be thrown off. So you want to make sure that you're excluding those stockouts from that equation, from that daily sales velocity equation.
So I have a question for you. Your buy box retention rate. Amazon reports, you can pull that out of business reports. Does that include your stock out dates? In other words, if you're not in the buy box 100% of the time during a month, does that mean that you were out of stock, that's why you lost the buy box? Or does it just look at the days you were in stock and then checks if you were in the buy box?
Sure, that is something that we use as variables, because having a reseller business versus a private label business, you have to look at different factors. The stock outs, when you're looking at a private label business, there are two things. There's either you stocked out or your listing was suspended, right? And those two things should be treated the same way. When you have a reseller's business, you have got a few other things to look at. You have to decide whether you, what we do is we say, okay, you have two different factors. You had zero inventory at Amazon. We can read that. We can see if you had zero inventory. But then there's, if you had inventory, but you just weren't selling, that's a different thing, right? So we can see those two things as separate. And then we have an additional factor for that, where you can say, let's say I'm selling 20 units a day, and that's my consistent. And then all of a sudden I start selling, I sell 2 units a day. Well, that's going to be a variable. You may want to say anything below this percentage, I want to consider a stock out because something is going wrong, right? So that's where it comes into being a little bit more custom, is when you're able to choose. It's not just zero inventory, it's the change in my velocity.
Yeah, because that's the calculating that daily stock velocity is the key, because that's the key driver for every other calculation.
Exactly.
And that can be influenced by so many things. And just looking at the historical data is not necessarily going to be enough, mainly because, for example, seasonal changes, right? So if you look at historical data, you look at past 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Well, for something that is a summer item, and you look at the past 30, 60, 90 days up until April, it's going to have totally different. So what else are you looking at, I guess?
Sure. Yeah. So to that point, when I created SoStock, it was because there was this, there weren't very many systems out there, and the majority of the systems had this kind of black box algorithm where you couldn't see what was going into it, and they wouldn't tell you, and you couldn't really trust it. So the approach that I took was, okay, not every business is the same. Some are seasonal, some are not, some, are private label, some are wholesale. It needs to be more customizable. I think that Amazon sellers are much smarter than a cookie cutter algorithm, and they know the nuances of their business. So they need tools that will help them to handle those nuances. And one of them being the ability to look at seasonality, to look at trends, and to set your sales velocity based on those things.
So what I'm hearing is you need to look at, first of all, don't just go by your immediate past historical data. You have to look at last year this time, right? So, and then you can one way. So I remember when I was doing this selling, I created this huge Excel sheet that would primarily fetch the data, but I had columns. Last 30 days, last year, last 30 days, and then last 60 days, last year, last 30, and then last year, next month. And therefore that would give me next month, this year. So that was something that gave me some idea, but you know what I ended up with? There was no real trend. It was very hard. It was like all over the place. So that, but some items, they had some indicators. So some, I should say, consistency. So bottom line, that's another dimension to add. So you have to decide. And if you are doing seasonal, that's even more important, because forward changing season.
Absolutely. And with seasonal, you have, in order to get that right, you need to add a trend element. So when we have our seasonal calculation, when we started out years ago, we used to do where it was just giving you all of the sales data for last year and replacing it to this year. So if you sold 10 last year, we would put 10 this year. And yet that is, and then if there's a stock out, we would calculate what would you have sold if you hadn't stocked out. That got us only so far. What we ended up doing is now we have seasonality where it sets a baseline and it says, okay, this is what you sold for the entire year. And, you know, January, based on that baseline, January, you sold, let's say 80% of that, 80% of that 100% average. Maybe you sold in December, you sold 200% of what your average for the year was. So that's how we set the pattern. There's a sales pattern, right? The sales pattern of, you know, this year I go here, and then during this time of the year I drop, and then I come up, and then I drop, and then I go up for the holidays. That'll give you the pattern, but the other thing that we apply is the trend. So if last year I sold X amount, but I'm already trending 5% up this year, then I should take last year's data and apply that 5% trend so that it's more accurate to the new level that I'm operating off of.
So, I mean, this automatically, it's not like there is a switch says, oh, this is a seasonal product. This is for everything. You can say, so that's very smart. So you've taken the whole year's sales, you've taken a monthly average, and then whatever that monthly average is for each month, you can see if that month was over or below, above or below that monthly average.
Yeah.
And then you can then say, okay, this year, that month, based on how many pieces you've achieved, then you can automatically predict the rest of the year what kind of a quantity sales that you would. That's very smart.
Yeah.
Okay, that handles another level of complexity. You can then compare what you come up with against last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So now we've got layer 2. It's okay. That's great. And I'm enjoying this conversation very much because really peeling the layers. So, okay, I throw you another layer. How about advertising efforts?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. That was one of the before restock limits, stocking out due to marketing inside of a vacuum, meaning marketing without inventory, having an idea of what the marketing plans were before restock limits was the #1 reason people stocked out. As I talked to hundreds of sellers throughout the growth of SoStock. The first year and a half, I was the only one doing the onboardings, and we onboarded every single person onto the account. So I would talk to sellers and I would ask them, I'd talk to sellers, I'd talk to agencies, you know, PPC agencies, have you ever stocked a client out? 100% answer, yes. So marketing plans need to be incorporated into inventory plans in order for inventory to be able to stay ahead and stay proactive, whereas generally inventory teams are reactive.
Yes. And you cannot be reactive in inventory management because that's going to drive suddenly that your reactive approach becomes the driver, and you can't be just reacting to life, right? So you have to be taking control. So how do you factor the marketing plans into your inventory plan?
Sure. So there are a couple of different ways. One would be to add an additional sales increase. So say a percentage would tag a bunch of different SKUs and say, all of these SKUs are going to be part of a marketing campaign, a PPC campaign. So let's apply 10% and say, we think we're going to get 10% lift off of this campaign. And so it would go into that timeline, 10% lift for all of those particular SKUs. And then you have things like, you know, coupon codes. Well, you know, coupon codes might have an additional lift. So you would add, you know, growth for that. Lightning deals, or, you know, email campaigns, any sort of campaign that's going to take a specific period of time, you can program that time. You say between this date and this date, I'm doing a lightning deal, or a 7-day deal. This week I'm doing a 7-day deal, and I think I'm going to move an additional 1,500 units during that deal. So what it will do is we'll take that, chop it up into seven different sales per day. That 1,500 would be divided by 7, and that would be your new daily sales velocity for that period of time. So that now the person who is running, the inventory will know, okay, there's an extra 1,500. We have to make sure that we can support that. Do we have enough inventory? Do we have to order early because that's depleting our stores? So now instead of ordering next month, we're ordering this month. And so it'll change everything. It'll adjust all of the timetables for the inventory team so that they can be aware and be prepared to avoid a stock out.
So you are adding a percentage as a premium because of the advertising efforts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can add a percentage, or you can add a period of time and number of units. So those are two different approaches depending on the type of advertising.
Okay, so this is at SKU level.
Yeah. So these changes you can apply across the entire catalog. You can apply to a number of SKUs or to an individual SKU. And
those percentage applications as a model, those are the drivers. You say you get I'm going to add an extra 10% or extra 15%. So those are your drivers, and then which will then result in the calculated projected sell-through rate.
Yes.
Okay. I have a different approach.
Okay.
Tell me what you think. So at the end of the day, let's assume that you have one SKU, you're selling one SKU, because whatever you do for one SKU, you can extrapolate across all the SKUs. So you're selling one SKU. At the end of the day, where does the sale come from? The sale comes from conversions. Conversions come from visitors. Visitors come from click-throughs. Click-throughs come from impressions.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, ultimately, your conversion rate is key, and then also number of visitors to the page is key.
Yeah.
You can run campaigns all day long. Their entire goal is to drive people to your product detail page.
Yeah.
So therefore, my thinking is, rather than pull a percentage, why not link it back to the number of visitors, just like the way you did the average calculation, monthly average across the year, and then checking this month against that monthly average. You could say, okay, what was the total number of impressions, and therefore what is the impression, and then apply. You get the idea. Apply as things are happening. Read that real-time data from your page, and then say, okay, based on what's going on, what do you think about that?
I think that's awesome. I think that's really interesting. You would then want to do the same thing with conversion rates, because one of the other things I used to talk a lot about copywriting. I have a copywriting agency. Don't talk about it so much because it's been all about stock, but conversion rates, if you change your listing and you get a 5% boost, well, then, and that's one of those things we say, okay, put a percentage in for the boost that you think you're going to get, or that you start seeing that you're getting, to be able to factor that in. Of course, after a while, those sales will start picking up, and then you will want to shut off that additional growth. But I think it's very interesting to look at page view increases and the conversion rate increases as kind of a leading indicator to sales.
We had to work on this, because
this
is definitely. So I tell you what you do. I mean, ultimately, you have two drivers. That's the number of visitors and conversion rate, and then you can set a baseline and your driver as variable. Okay, what kind of an increase do I want?
Mhm.
And tell me when I reach this, or tell me when I'm below, tell me when I'm above. But
Mhm.
it's the number of visitors and conversion rate. And then
Yeah.
you can read that real time. And as that happens, you can have a predictive,
Mhm.
number that
Yeah.
you can apply to see, because this is happening all the time. You can say, okay, based on this, you can look at what conversion you're getting right now, and then the number of visitors you're getting right now. And then
Mhm.
based on that, you say, okay, this is now layer 3. We're talking about layer
Mhm.
3. On layer
Yeah.
3, those two drivers, okay, if it's this, then apply this. And
Mhm.
then in the meantime, you can track the numbers and see if those conversions are going up
Mhm.
or your visitors are going up. And then the
Mhm.
system would automatically calculate the.
Yeah. Yeah,
What
it's
do you
another
think?
way of isolating trend, I guess, looking at that, the increase as, over, let's say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to be able to start predicting, where's that going to level off, do we think?
Yeah, because I mean, this has to be part of the system. I'm telling you, because
Mhm.
what happens is, let's say I'm an agency, okay? Because
Mhm.
everybody, I just had another guest, he's a growth agency, and
Mhm.
right away they drive growth. Okay, what does growth mean? Well, growth means that I'm going to get more orders. Well, where will it come from? Well, I'm going to get more people to your product page, because
Mhm.
I'm going to do such a great job with organic ranking. You're going to get more people landing on the page. Great.
Mhm.
And by the way, we are also going to work on your A plus. We're going to put premium A plus, and we're going to
Mhm.
change the pictures and blah, blah, blah. And you're going to get better conversion. Well, guess
Yeah.
what? I'm going to take those numbers, and then
Mhm.
I'm going to plug them into your system. And then
Yeah.
your system is going to say, well, this is your inventory requirement.
Yeah. Yeah. See, these things, it's interesting because, we were acquired by Carbon 6. And those are the things that that are so interesting about, this new era of the idea of linking these tools. There's a, PPC tool that is part of Carbon 6 called PPC Entourage. The data that would be able to feed in and get those two tools to communicate. If you've got PPC campaigns that you're starting up, well, we should pass that data on to the inventory team. If the inventory team is starting to, run low on stock, that should go to the PPC portion of the tool. So connecting all of these different dots, every action is very connected to every other action. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's cool.
Okay. So because I'm thinking as I'm talking to you,
Mhm.
and very interesting things can be implemented. Okay.
Yeah, I've always get it's funny because I'm only, smart as I am. I think, we've built a really good system, but we've done that in part with the support of the community. We've crowdsourced a lot of information. So I've talked to so many sellers in the beginning, now going out networking, doing, podcasts such as this. And it's just, getting other people's perspective on how they look at data or the different things that are important to them that have helped us to continue to advance the tool and not be stuck in, this ivory tower, or stuck with the idea that we know the best way to do it. There's
Yeah.
so many smart people that have been able to have influence on how we've built it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the collective effort is always the best.
Mhm.
So I have one more layer.
Mhm.
What about the trends on Amazon?
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. We don't do any scraping at this point, but there are ideas. We've actually talked with Seller Tools is one of the other tools, one of the other Carbon 6 tools, and they have trends within niches. So we have had that conversation of, they lend us that data. We don't do any scraping on SoStock. Other tools, may do scraping, but we don't have the aggregate data of niches. Seller Tools does have that aggregate data. So we've had that discussion of, to add that trend element, that market trend element, which is different than a single product's own trend. that element I think is, very interesting. And a lot of how it is developed is through looking at keyword searches. That specific product may have been great and may have been really popular last year, and there maybe have been, thousands upon thousands of keyword searches, and now there's only hundreds upon hundreds of keyword searches. Well, that is a huge indicator. That is a leading indicator of the market. And so that would be really interesting, is to decide part of that inventory purchasing decision. Do I buy 10,000 units? But if a product is on the way out, maybe that's not the right choice. So that's interesting too. I'll have to bookmark this podcast for ideas for future development.
Yeah, I mean, look, anybody listening to us, we're not, by the way, those who are listening, we're not having software talk here. What we're talking about is methodology. Software is just a tool. Of course, it makes your life easier, makes it more efficient, but it's based on an idea. What's the methodology here? And we're talking about methodology. And so far, what we covered is layer number one. What is your daily order velocity in the past 30, 60, 90 days? Layer number two is your seasonality. And we what you shared with us is, I love the method, very simple. Pick your monthly average and then see where you are this month compared to last year's monthly average. So that way you can see, and then each month, where is it compared to the average? That's another great one. And the third one we discussed, kind of brainstormed around, is look at your number of visitors to your page, look at your look at your conversion rate, and then based on what you hope to accomplish going forward, because this doesn't need to look at the past. All it's looking at is what you are achieving now, and therefore what you hope to achieve going forward, which will then factor in the advertising effort. So that's something that, whatever you're achieving today, you're likely to achieve that going forward. So then it's zero. So that, whatever you are getting from the others. But if somebody comes along and says, okay, we're going to advertise, we're going to do this, or you decide you're going to do that, you just plug in what kind of a difference it will make, and that will give you another bump. Now, the fourth layer is this category. More people want, for example, masks. Perfect one, right? So in 2019, how many mask sales there were? And in 2020, how many there were? I mean, that's a no-brainer, but that's an example of, and I'm sure there are other things in every category. So, what I'd like to do? I wonder if there is a way to get this number. Maybe one of the Carbon6 family members will have. When you go to the bestsellers page on Amazon, if you go amazon.com/GP/bestsellers, you can now drill down on, first of all, the number of categories you see there is a lot more. So you can just go based on that. But if you take that category 3 as a whole, you fit into one of those anyway, because when you list your product, you have to pick one of those.
Right.
I wonder if there is a number associated with every one of those category 3 members into showing the trend.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of trends, like there are software such as Keepa, which will show you your trend. So you can plug in the Keepa algorithm or the Keepa Chrome extension, and then every time you go to Amazon, you look at a listing, it'll show you that trend. Some of that data you have to pay for, so you have to have that membership, but they do have an API as well. So that's something that I've been eyeing recently as well, is that, perhaps being able to plug into your top 3 competitors, pull that trend data from your top 3 competitors or something. Just an example, just, one of the many things that could be added in terms of these layers as we talk about.
Yeah, I mean, listing by the trend, listing by listing, and looking at the ASINs, I'm more interested in because one of the things that we always want to know is what's the market size, right? So if the market size, you can say, okay, you go do a search today for a search term, and then whatever comes up on that first page, you can see how much they are generating in sales. Well, there is your market size. But I would be more interested in the category in general, because category will govern the So what you are interested in there is not necessarily, I should say, what I'm interested to see is not necessarily how many units or how much in sales, but in that category, what is the overall trend? Is it up or is it down? And then you can apply that to your category, your overall, because whatever you've done last year, it is likely to be more or less based on that category that your
Yeah.
item. So that would be another layer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. If you can pull that data, I'm wondering if you have to pull all the separate data for you, or if you had to pull that data and store it over time. It just depends on what is I think, some of these tools that are already tracking on that would be the tools to tap into, like Keepa, because
yes,
Keepa does keep track of it. And it's a fairly seasoned software, very, it's not like it just started this year and started collecting data. They've been collecting data for years. So I think there are places to do that, possibly be able to take that data and turn it into
absolutely.
something compiled.
I attended this conference, I believe, I don't know, about 8-9 years ago now. It was a big data conference. I don't know if you ever see any of those movies about, the start of the Silicon Valley revolution with Apple and Microsoft, and there's no computers yet. And you go to this computer show in those movies, they show that they would go to this computer show. It's a small room, a few booths, and that's all the industry was.
Right.
So this big data conference was exactly like that. It was a small room and a few people, a few keynote speakers. And one of them said that big data, not data, but data, is big data is becoming the thing. So everybody's not talking about it. However, he said what people don't know yet is that top consulting companies, they did multiple proof of concept projects. And what they found was out of every dollar they spent on those POCs, their return was 89 cents.
Really?
In other
Wow.
words, every big data initiative resulted in a loss. And then they started studying this further, said, why is that? And what they discovered was the following. First of all, big data is a complex operation, because what is the definition of big data? It's too much data coming in a time frame, so that it's hard to handle. It's massive volumes of data in total to store, massive volumes of data to report. So therefore, the technology, it's not like good luck loading your Excel file with 5 million lines. It will never open. So as yet, this is so easy to accumulate very quickly. So therefore, they said that the technology knowledge required, and therefore the skill set needed for big data to collect, store, and process is totally different than using that data.
Yeah.
And that skill doesn't yet exist about how to use the data. All our focus is on collect it, store it, process it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any money. Then comes the second layer. And the second layer is, okay, you're getting data from one place. Well, it's not enough, because you need multiple sources of data. So therefore, like, for example, you looking at your daily, we just did, 4 layers. Just looking at your daily sell-through rate, that's one source. The other source is advertising data. So you need to combine. So therefore, the key is to pick up data, by the way, a lot of data from multiple sources. That's the second piece. And the third and most important is turn that data into actionable data.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the part that's an unknown. So, okay, you get this, you get that, Keepa delivers this and so on and so. But what do you do with it? And my example is, when you're driving a car, your dashboard shows how fast you're going. Okay. When you're on the expressway, it shows 35 miles an hour. What do you do? That's the key, right?
Right.
If you get somebody behind you honking, you have to speed
Mhm.
up. It's the experience. But
Yeah.
if you are in a built-up area, you're doing 50 miles an hour. What do? Then you have to slow down. So you have to
Right.
know to slow down. You have to know how to slow down, not just slam on the brakes, but
Yeah.
slow. And also you have to know when to do it. So I guess that's the part that fascinates me the most. So
Mhm.
just having the data is not enough. So
Yeah.
Chelsea, I want to talk to you about something else that you and I discussed when we first connected.
Yeah.
Optimization of your products, your product packaging. And so talk to
Yeah.
us about that. That's another area where you actually increase profit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Something I'm very passionate about. I've always been. I started So Stock because I wasn't making as much profit as I wanted to, and so I started with inventory. And inventory has, if you stock out, if you overstock, over order, all of those things cost you money. So profit has always been my end game, and this was kind of where I started. And I started looking at, well, what are the other places that people try to save money? Okay, you've got sourcing. You try to negotiate with your supplier. You've got trying to find the most feasible ways to ship your goods, freight forwarders, and you try to get different quotes. You look at your PPC campaigns, your advertising campaigns, and then reimbursements. And those were kind of the 4 places that people looked to recover their profit. Inventory was that other place that I kind of honed in on in 2018, 2019. Supply chain has been something that I'm now have shifted towards. I teach people about it. I talk about it a lot because I believe there's huge opportunity for people. Everything is dictated by size and weight. Fulfillment fees, storage fees, shipping, all of those things, handling, but we aren't looking at that. We're just accepting our products for our products. When we start to peel back the layers and look at our products, I have, beauty products are a great example. I have a jar of moisturizer. The jar is this big. The amount of product is that big. And then there's a box. All of that you're paying for. You're paying in excess fulfillment fees. You're paying in storage fees. You have to have more cartons. So you're paying on a per carton basis. If you're using a 3PL, you're paying for them to put a label on every single carton. You're storing every single pallet. You're having to palletize when it comes out of the container. Every single thing is adding more money to your expenses for every single product, so that, I call it the term death by paper cuts. It's every little thing, every little thing that's costing you money. So you look at supply chain and how can we reduce the size or reduce the weight or both of everything that we're doing across our supply chain.
So what is your methodology for optimizing your overall product handling, so to speak?
Sure. Starting with looking at the product itself, and is there a way to reduce my packaging size, and not just reduce it, but reduce it so that it's going to reduce my fees. Obviously, you have to look at the fee structure. That's one of the other passions that I have. One of the other obsessions is looking at and trying to dissect Amazon's fee structure, Amazon's capacity manager, some of these policies that affect inventory and affect the profitability. What does Amazon actually mean about each of these things? And when they have their fee structure, they changed their fee structure completely to add dimensional weight. So you have to look at the size of the product. Is it small standard? Is it large standard? Can we move it from large standard to small standard? Can we reduce our cost by reducing the weight in some way? Can we reduce it by reducing the size? One of the things that people aren't looking at, we actually are going to be releasing a tool called a product resizer to look at how can we reduce the fees on this. And the weight is an obvious one. The size is an obvious one when it comes to oversized or large standard to small standard. Dimensional weight is the tricky one. That's the one when I'm, working on putting the formula together to figure out how to calculate how I can reduce a fee by reducing dimensional weight. It's actually the biggest opportunity right now is dimensional weight. People don't realize it because you may have a product where, and I've run these reports, you only have to reduce it by, let's say 50 cubic feet, which could be a 1/4 inch on any one side. And you save 16 cents per unit. You move it into that lower size tier. There are not a lot of people who are looking at their business this way. And that's just the start. You could be sitting on tens of thousands of dollars in profit across your entire catalog just by focusing on these things.
Yeah, ironically, I used to be in transportation business long time ago.
Yeah.
And it just, life takes you places and the opportunities came along, and I was in it to the extent that, handling air freight, sea freight, and, road freight. So in transportation business, nobody cares about actual dimensions.
Yeah.
Everybody is focused on volume weight, because what you do is when there's a consignment that's going to go from A to B, it needs to be picked up. And the first thing that they are asking is, how much space does it take up?
Yeah.
So the best kind of cargo is the kind of cargo that takes up little space, but very heavy, because they are very rare. Most of the cargo, based on the calculations of volume weight, when you translate, like that's the standard question, which one is heavier, a ton of cotton or a ton of lead? Which one is heavier? Well, both the same, right? But except, good luck transporting a ton of cotton. You're gonna need God knows how many truckloads, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
Because most products are like cotton, they take up more space. So I'm always focused on this volume weight, except when I did this, I was in England, so they calculate in different different units of measure. Here it's different, but the principle is the same. You have to figure out how much space it takes up and what it translates to in terms of weight, and then compare that to the actual weight. And you are going to find most cases your volume weight is higher than your actual weight. So you're gonna have to do something about it. So so in your case, you are talking about reducing the amount of space it takes. So therefore reducing the amount of chargeable weight, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's, it's a mathematical equation. It can be a lot, but especially if you're trying to look at your entire catalog, but it's worth it. It's one of those things. And I shout it from stages, podcasts, webinars, all of that. It's the thing that's it's the long play. It's not even that long. Like SEO, trying to rank a website is much longer play than changing the dimensions of your, of your product. True story. A friend of mine named Dr. Travis Ziegler, he has a PPC agency called Profitable Pineapple. His business that he ended up actually selling, he started as an eye doctor, which is why, the Dr. Travis, he had an eye brand, an eye care brand, and he was selling sunglasses as one of those. He had it in a hard case. He reduced it to a soft case and was able to reduce the fees, the storage fees, the fulfillment fees. He could put more units per carton, more units per pallet. So he ended up saving on that one SKU, $70,000 a year, just on the one SKU. So if you look at your entire business across your entire catalog, how, you reduce, let's say 16 cents here, 20 cents there, and then you compound it with all of the items, all of the savings you have on, your carton fees, your pallet storage fees, your palletization fees. You can get more into every single container. Doing this one thing and then spreading it, taking it further down the road in terms of your carton pallet and all that, it has a compounding effect. So it will be, I think, for most businesses, one of the most profitable things they do if they actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so true. The packaging is everything. And I remember, when I was an Amazon seller, I was in health and beauty category. We sold fragrances. And these fragrances, I mean, at the end of the day, it's liquid, right? So what makes it expensive is the formula and how it smells.
Yeah.
But they would come in these elaborate bottles. I mean, it's a whole industry to design a fragrance bottle. It's a whole job, and it's an extremely expensive job. And as yet, they create these bottles. It's so unique and heavy. They are heavy.
Yeah.
And why is that? It's if you think about it, it's very simple. How would you feel if I sold Chanel No. 5 in a plastic small bottle to you? You wouldn't think it's worth as much, right?
Yeah, it's luxury.
It's the perception. So they want to create that perception, and that perception comes from the packaging, and the packaging, the heavier, the more substantial looking, the more money you can ask for. But then guess what? You're going to pay a lot more for transportation, for storage, and everything else. And that's where you have to get creative. I mean,
and things are changing because you have retail, and on retail it's more about being able to touch and feel, experience it that way, and also taking up more space on the shelf so you get more noticed. Nowadays you have images, people don't get to touch it, so your images are what sells. You can be a little bit more flexible, and you can reduce the size of things because you don't need to impress by taking up that shelf space or by having that good touch and feel factor.
I have a funny story. When I was growing up, I didn't grow up in this country, and so we would have friends, some family members. They would travel abroad, and then we would always ask, "Oh, can you bring me this? Can you bring me that?" A typical thing. So it was always a burden on anybody who was traveling abroad. They would have this long shopping list. So what would happen is they would come back and bring the stuff. I would always feel bad about the fact that they would always take the item out of its packaging because it would take up space in their suitcase or whatever. So I would end up with the thing in a plastic bag. I never liked it. So it's like a thrill for me. Finally, I move. Now I'm able to go buy these things in stores. And it was like I would keep the packaging for a long time. It was like because something I never had. So now fast forward. Now these days, how does Amazon ship anything? It's all in the Amazon box, right? It just has the Prime tape on it. So it's all about getting rid of the excess stuff that is not necessary, because you've got the pictures, you've got the videos. That's what people look at. So anybody who is really into heavy packaging, the message is cut it down, right?
Reduce it as much as possible, but do it in a way that it's actually going to be beneficial, because you don't want to go through all of that and realize that, hey, it didn't actually make an impact. If you reduce the size of something but the weight is too heavy, or if you reduce the weight of something but don't realize that the dimensional weight is higher than the weight, well, why did you even reduce the weight? You need to make sure that ultimately whatever change you're making is going to affect the bottom line. And then consider not going up to the edge of something, having a little bit less than going up to the edge, because Amazon remeasures things. And sometimes they'll remeasure it. Maybe the box gets squashed a little bit and that machine remeasures it and it's slightly off. And so now you knocked yourself back up into that other size tier, and you have to go back and you have to open a case and they have to remeasure. And it's just, it gets to be a headache if you're just so close to that line. So you want to give yourself a cushion.
Yeah, it's so true. This is a fascinating conversation. I love how straight to the point kind of conversation it is.
Yeah.
So this was great, Chelsea. So let's now get to know you a little bit. I'm always interested in the background of my guests and
Sure.
particularly their childhood, because
Mhm.
I mean, we go through life, we go from job to job and career to career. But
Yeah.
tell us, let's start with where you grew up.
Sure. I grew up in LA, in kind of the Valley area. So my first home that I really remember growing up in was in Toluca Lake, which it was in the middle of LA, but had kind of like a small town type of feel, you know, riding bikes and walking to the liquor store. You know, we called it the gum store because that's what we got at the liquor store was gum. You know, selling little pictures on the side to the neighbors that walked by, those types of things. You know, it was maybe, you know, the 80s, it was a different time, I guess. I kind of, you know, wish that kids had that experience still, but that's kind of my, you know, where I grew
So
up.
you were selling things to people.
Yeah, we had a lot of those things. You know, it's funny because I think I always knew that I was going to be, you know, have some sort of a business. I would draw pictures and sell them. Later on at my friend's house, we had a little garden where we grew herbs and cherry tomatoes. And then we put the little tomatoes in bags, put them in our wagon and go door to door selling the tomatoes to the neighbors.
So, I mean, how did that interest come about?
I mean, my parents had businesses. My dad had he had a copywriting business, or not a copywriting, a copy graphics business. So, you know, kind of like a Kinko's. He had that business, and he first was a manager of one of a different copy services business, and then he and my uncle opened up their own. It didn't last. They had it for a few years though, and then my mom had a daycare, and then it got turned into a school. So I was in her private school. I think by the time I graduated, there were only 30 other people in the school, and my older brother and I were the only people in the graduating class. But just to see, kind of have those influences on them going and working for themselves.
Also, so they were working somewhere and then ended up becoming the business owner to run the same kind of operation.
My dad, yeah, and then my mom, she just had a daycare, and then she turned it into a little private school.
I see. So
Yeah.
it was an entrepreneurial family.
Yeah, yeah.
So was it just seeing this and hearing the conversations, or was there encouragement from your parents for you to get into business?
I think it was just, you know, I don't remember them. Like my dad always encouraged me to write. That's one of the other passions that I have. He always encouraged the writing side of things. And I think that I just liked I kind of had an inclination, and they would just let me do it. You know, I drew pictures and I was like, oh, we can go sell this, because we did it back to the gum store. I wanted money for gum. The first club that I ever created was called the Gum Club. And so we would get money, and then we would go buy gum. And so it was my friends and I, we'd you know, wash your mom's car or sell little pictures to the neighbors. Whatever it was to buy gum was, I think, the first ever impetus. I haven't even thought of that, like why. So I'm just kind of putting that together now. As we had this little box, and we put money in there, and we put the gum in there, and then as we were running out of gum, we had to make more money.
So the gum was your driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, when you're a kid, you know.
So you still like gum?
I don't really chew gum as much anymore. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I should start again.
Well, I mean, look, your I guess your success today is because you got into making money, so to speak, to get
Yeah.
what you wanted. So I guess gum represented what you wanted at the time.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because my little brothers, I have an older brother and then two younger brothers. I never remember getting an allowance. My older brother and I, we never got an allowance. My older brother would ask for money from my mom, but I did babysitting. I did things to make my own money. My little brothers got an allowance, and I really like the idea of not having to ask my mom for money and just having my own money. Money allowed me to do things that I wanted to do, like buy concert tickets or, go to the movies, buy candy at the candy store. So I just like the freedom of it, I think.
Yeah, funny you say that, because I remember growing up as a kid. First of all, my parents were very strict in terms of working. They said, no, we don't want you making any money. Don't think about making money, because they were afraid that if I tasted how good it was to make money, I would stop studying and never continue. So that was a big deal. They said, after you graduate from two things about making money, so working somewhere, making money is a no-no. The second thing was playing cards was a no-no, because they associated that with gambling. And they said, no, we don't want. And my father said, I never forget, that the day you graduate from college is when you and I sit down and I'll teach you how to play cards. Of course, by that time, it was too late, because all my friends knew how to play and I had no idea. So to this day, I don't know how to play cards. So that was the whole thing. And my father not allowing me to work anywhere, all I have is my allowance. He would never pay my allowance. He was always behind. So always behind. And so they wouldn't let me work. They wouldn't let me get any money myself. And then as yet, they wouldn't pay either. So I had to figure out how to get things done with my own means. So in your case, sounds like, you wanted to be independent to get what you want. And gum just represented it. So I bet you today something else replaced that gum, that you have something that you always aspire for.
Yeah, just the idea of not having to, being able to control my own schedule and to create something that was mine, that I built that, I made that, not having to work for someone else, I think. And, I've always wanted to have a lifestyle. One of the goals that I have is to be able to build enough revenue, enough income, enough money to be able to then go and take some time off and write. So that was always my objective, was write. But I always had this kind of left brain, right brain type of thing where, creative, I want to do the writing, and the idea was, get famous off of writing. But then digging into it, seeing that the majority of people make less than a teacher's salary writing. So I had to kind of go, well, I really like business as well. Why don't I go make some money and then I'll, do the writing thing. And so that's kind of been the trade-off. Was now I'm doing the business thing and I really enjoy that, but wanting to build up a lifestyle and then take the time to do writing instead of having to work for someone else. Because I did that. I worked for someone else for years, very stressful job in finance. And then I'd get home and I'd write 1,000 words a day, and it's not a sustainable life to being creative.
No, it's opposite forces are always in play. One is a routine, the other is creative. And then there is a John Cleese, you know who that is, right?
Yeah.
So he's actually a very interesting guy, because he gives speeches, he takes place in panels and things about creativity and afterlife and things like that. Very deep stuff. But he has, especially for anybody listening, look up on YouTube, it's speech by John Cleese about creativity. So he goes through it and he says there are 5 things needed for creativity in business, in management. And he goes through, you know what 2 of them are? So he goes through, he says the first one, and the second one, he says time. And then he explains it. And then the third and the fourth one, he goes time again. So you need time twice, because first of all, you need time. You can't just rush it. You need time. Number one, that's the first time. The
Yeah.
second time is once you have that time and then you put it in place and then you sit down, you need time to get into it
Yeah.
so that you can actually be creative. So
Yeah.
you need time twice. So that's why I say opposing forces. One is routine. You have to work. You have to be productive. Come home, then you have to eat. You have to sleep, and then you got little time. And then in that time, you need time to get into it. And by the time, and also these things take a life of their own, right? So when you start in that creative process, it goes on a long time.
You get
And
into the
before you
flow.
know it,
Yeah.
it's 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's it actually connects very well to a book that I just read, an amazing book. It was called, and I think I needed it at the time. It's funny because I went to this, little bookstore, and I had been thinking, I really want to change my lifestyle. And, there's so many distractions, so many different things, social media and Netflix and, all of these things. And I really need, to kind of come back to myself a little bit more, look down, and there's this book. I couldn't find it later on, went back, nowhere else. It just happened to be sitting on this table, very, separate from the display there. It's called Stolen Focus. And it's all about distractions, but it's on a macro level, on a societal level, all of the things that distract us from actually getting into flow state, being able to, spend the time to be creative, to connect with people, all of the ways that society has been built up to distract us. And, not just on a personal level, but how do we solve this on a societal level? And it's a big thing to kind of shift the entire society, and it's something that, probably won't happen in our generation, but it's something to make you look at the world differently. We're so distracted, and we're, with all these other things, we do have the time, but we're so run ragged at the end of the day. Then we're like, oh, well, let me just watch a show, or let me just check Facebook. And I've been really shifting my lifestyle a lot, on the heels of reading this book. And I think it's, very, very valuable, and it's very freeing to go, what, I have time to read a book. Let me go outside. Let me, sit down, and let me turn things off for a little while.
Well, this is a little bit like one of those sayings that Yogi Berra said, he has several, nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. So it's like that. I have a similar one of my own. We're so busy wasting our time. We have no time for anything.
Yeah.
That's what it's
exactly.
You really can you not live without the Netflix and others? Can you not live without going through the TikTok reels? And
Right.
Of course, but you're so busy. But anyway, well, it's a great conversation, Chelsea. And you are obviously, you know what you want in life, and you want to go get it. And that's what you are doing ever since you decided you wanted to chew gum
Yes.
as a little kid. Thank you. And so tell us, how can people reach you? And more important, how can people look into SoStock?
Sure. Yeah. Go to sostock.com/connect. That's where, my socials are, my email. Also, demo free tools, some of the free tools that I mentioned about, changing your carton size. And then, check out carbon6.io. SoStock is listed there with the other tools that they've acquired.
Great. Thank you very much, Chelsea. It's a great conversation, and I'm sure people will check it out. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this brings us to the end of another episode, and I'll see you in the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the episode, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too.